Alright guys, here it is, episode 4. We're past halfway. If you haven't seen episodes 1 through 3, check the description. I'll put the links for those there. Before we jump right into this video, let's answer a few questions that I've got in the comments section from the previous videos. Lewis Funk asked me what the cab was from on the fiberglass. And I'm not sure, but here was the front, and it has a bow tie on it, so it was a Chevy something or other. I ended up Googling around and I couldn't find out who made him. I was going to put this big Ford emblem over it because I don't think there's any Chevy parts on this, and I thought that that would make some people angry, which would be funny. But because I had to cut 10 inches out of the front of the hood, I'm gonna end up losing the bow tie anyways. So hope that answers it. I'm not really sure, some kind of Chevy. ACO was asking me what it weighs and if I'm going to run an open or limited slip rear differential, and both of those will be answered in this episode. Ryan Taylor was asking if I was going to add extra support to the front coilover mounts. If you remember in the last video, I had the goofy coilovers mounted to their own bar, and then the roll cage was separate, and that will be answered in this video as well. It gets a lot of support, don't worry about that. Let's see, who else? Oh, Dead Slow 201 did a nice little write-up about my rear coilover mounts and how they were lacking support, and they very much were in the last episode. But I do a little bit of support on that in this episode, but I will do some more in the next one, so that'll be all taken care of. Just to update you guys on the finances, we're at $1,131 left. This is a tight budget, but I think I'll be able to make do with it. I probably should have made it 5,000. It would have been nicer, but 4,000, I wanted it to be as low as possible because there's going to be a few things here where I could easily just buy a part and not have to build it, and that kind of takes away some of the fun. I really like doing low dollar builds because you have to get creative, and those help you on the higher dollar builds. That's it for the questions and update on the finances. It's 112 degrees out here today, and I have been running errands all morning, so the garage, I haven't had my evap unit on, and it's 95 in here right now. So I better get out of here before my phone shuts down from the heat. All right, here we go. All right, here is how the cage is looking right now. I did some crossbar supports here for where the rear coilovers meet up to the roof. And then I did a couple bars on the back here. And then I did a large X bar across the front to give it some strength. And then I did these bars here to connect everything together, and then I added these bars to connect the front coilover mounts to the cage. And I think it's looking quite strong. So the next step is going to be to take the fiberglass, mount the fiberglass to the chassis, and then start the actual fiberglass mounts. And then once the rear fiberglass is mounted up, then I can figure out what I'm going to do back here. And then what I'm thinking is I'll probably do a bar from here down to here, and then have the fiberglass mounted on, and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do for the bumper. And once the bumper's on, I could just make sure everything's secure. Getting there. Let's get this sucker weighed up. Front left, 608. All right, front right, 746. Rear right, 710. And the rear left, 838. Alrighty. Right, the front weighs 1354 and the rear is 1548. Total 2902. 4654 weight distribution, not bad. And here's a little picture I drew of the buggy. Alright, this is how the body's looking right now. I've got to finally bite the bullet and cut this rear section here. So I've got it lined up pretty good, I think. It's going to be about this height, give or take, so the tire will tuck a little bit. But first step I'm going to do is I'm going to use a hole saw here. Then I'm going to cut this out so I can slide it, so I can get it pretty close to where it's going to be, and then go from there. So let's do that. Alright, well, it's starting to look a lot better, but boy, I still have a ways to go. I very much dislike fiberglass work. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to chop out this extended cab because we don't need it anymore. And I want the wonderful people that I put in the back seat to be able to see out of the window. So I'm going to chop that, and then I'm going to see if I can get away without having to cut this section out as well, I'm going to just cut here, move it over, and then I'll see if I can make this blend to this. I don't know if I can make that work or not. All right, here is the new plan. I'm going to take the front door section and the rear fender, and I'm going to mate them together with fiberglass right here. So while it's still on the vehicle and everything is bolted up, I'll cut it wherever I need to cut it. I'll use some pieces of steel to bolt everything together, and then I'll come in from the back side and I'll fiberglass everything down. So that's my plan. You can see how it's chopped here, so I can bend this in and then get these two surfaces close and try and make it look nice. It's going to be a decent amount of work, but I do think that this will be the best looking option moving forward. And then once I get this side the way I like it, then I'll just try to match up the other side as close as possible. So let's get to it. Alright, here's how the fiberglass is looking right now. You can see I used a couple of metal plates to kind of stitch it together temporarily. On the back side of the aluminum plate here, I did some tape so that I can peel it off. But basically, I'm going to remove this as one piece, set it down on the ground, flip it upside down, and then start the process of fiberglassing it. Which, that's not the worst part. The worst part is the sanding. Ah, the sanding. So, alright, let's get to it. Alright, I've got the first coat of fiberglass on here. It's coming along pretty good. You can see there's a couple little air bubbles. I'm going to drill those out and then fill in with resin. And then what I did on the top here was I just clamped these two pieces together, and they came together pretty good. I did glue in between, and so that'll help make it stronger. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take out these screws here, and then I'm going to do fiberglass over this joint, and then I'll do some more fiberglass up here. This side is a lot thicker than this side, and so I need to put in as much reinforcements as I can right there. So let me show you what it looks like on the other side. So here's what it's looking like over here. So I'm going to take out these screws so that I can do the back side of that. And I'll take these out as well, these plates, and then that way I can fiberglass this side. Alright, this fiberglass is really starting to come along. You see I've got the rear finally made it up pretty good. I've sanded it down a little bit. It's looking good. It's getting there. I've got the tape marked up where I want to make this line a little bit cleaner. And then I'm going to end up chopping down into this section here just to make it easier to get in and out of. But it's looking good. Let me show you how the other side's looking. This is what it looks like before sanding it. So I did the fiberglass, and then this is the short strand fiberglass. It's kind of like Bondo, but with just little bits of fiberglass built into it to make it a little bit stronger. So the next step is going to be the rear bumper. What I'm thinking about doing is just a 5-inch tube here and here, and then I'll do a bar that goes across, and then I'll do a bar from here up to here, and then I'll do a couple of mounts to mount that fiberglass and kind of straighten everything up. It's pretty dramatic, the difference between the fenders on these two sides when you actually have them lined up next to each other. The wheel well gap is like 2 inches different between the left and right. I guess that's just the nature of the fiberglass molds. So I'm just kind of eyeballing everything because nothing's perfect with fiberglass. Okay, so I've got the bumper all mounted up. I think it came out very nice. And then a couple of support bars here and here. And then I did a couple of mounts for the fiberglass, and it's looking great. This is how it's looking right now. I'm about ready to do the finishing welding on the cage. I wanted to show you I am quite proud of some of these gaps that I was able to get on these joints here. They're just so tight. I'm quite proud of myself on this one. It's been a little while since I've built a cage. The last one I built was in February of last year. Well, this gap's not that great, but oh, this one's my favorite. Check this out. Look at that. Even the dust is collecting in there. But yeah, it's not bad. I'm quite happy with it. But I just wanted to show you these joints before I go welding everything up, hiding all of it forever. I'm just so happy with it. So here she is. and it is time to get to work. All right, I'm going over this thing before I weld everything up, and I forgot to weld in a support from here up to here, and then from here into here. All right, here's how the front bumper is looking now. Much better than before. I added some supports to the main hoop and then some supports outside to the little feeler bar. So there she is. Now it is ready to weld up the whole thing. And I don't think I'm going to do a time lapse or video that because it's not very exciting. It's just a ton of welding. So just here she is. When you see her again, she will be fully welded on all these little joints. All right, I picked up some goodies. I've got a remote fuel filler and then 18-inch limiting straps for the rear. And then here's my window nets. So they are bright orange. And I haven't told you what color I'm going to paint it yet, but this can give you a little hint. These are more for the window nets. Here's all the paint. Again, I don't want to show you what color until it's ready to go. And then for the rear end, I've got a Spartan locker, the install kit, and 373 gears. That should be fun. All right, guys, I got my new drive shaft made. It was 160 bucks. The tech there was very happy because he only had to do one little washer for a weight. He said the U-joints will last forever, but we'll see. I also got another delivery today. Let me show you guys. It is pretty awesome. I will give you a hint. It is 835 pounds and it's a tool. Very excited about it. So I'll open that up a little bit later. Okay, so what we have here is a Bailey 52-inch shear brake roller. So it's got the rollers up at the top, and then it's got the brake here, and then at the bottom it's got this cool guy shear. I've had my eye on this for a while, but I've just been waiting to bite the bullet on this. And let me show you what I've been using in the meantime. So this is what I've been using. It's a 30-inch brake, and it's worked pretty well for me, but it's starting to get a little old and it can't do anything too thick. And then I've got my 12-inch shear, and again, it does an okay job of slicing, but nothing too thick and nothing too long. And so I finally broke down and bought what I really wanted. Now the straw that broke the camel's back on that was fabricating this fuel tank cover. And I really wanted to use the factory fuel tank because it has the pump inside, so the pump runs a lot cooler, and obviously it's a lot cheaper, but I hated how ugly it was. And so I thought I'd do a nice box around it, and I started the process. You can see how far along I got. And during the process, I finally calculated how much time I was wasting by having to grind off a lot of these long cuts and use my shear and all that. And when I finally did the math, I thought, boy, I am just losing money by not having a larger shear. So that's why I finally broke down and bought it. But let me show you how I made this up to this point using just my super basic tools, and then in the next episode I'll finish making this box with the proper tools. But I do need to make a mount for my shear, and I went to the metal shop and picked up some tubing for it. So I'm going to use this 11 gauge, so it's an 1/8 of an inch thick, 2-inch square tubing for that, and then of course got some more steel for another project. But that'll be next episode where I actually get that thing up and running, but I'll show you right now how I got the fuel tank box to this point. So the first thing I'm going to do here is get rid of the factory vapor line. That's not going to be necessary once I have the remote fuel filler. And then I want to pull the pump out. And this is just to make sure that the condition of it is still okay and double check that sock on the bottom and then look at the inside of the tank, make sure there's no sediment or anything like that. The inside of this one ended up looking perfect. These Crown Vic tanks are awesome. They're almost perfectly rectangular, and then they have a little bowl on the bottom to help prevent fuel starvation, so that as the fuel is sloshing around, that bowl always stays full of fuel. Now this is some scrap 20 gauge steel that I had left over from the Metro project a while back, and it ended up being just almost perfectly the right size. So I'm just marking it up here so that I can then bend the ends around it and then start the process of building the box from there. So I bend both ends in, and then I'm going to do like a 1/2 inch square tube frame for it. And then it will be removable so that you can always pull the fuel tank out if you need to service it. So these are the handheld shears that I use. They're pretty good, but they leave a little bit of a jagged edge, so it can be a little bit annoying to deal with, especially if it's something that needs to look pretty sharp. Now right here, I'm just marking up where I want my bead rolls to go so that I can give a little bit of strength to it. And I ended up doing 3/8 bead rolls on each of the ends, and then I switched out the die and I did an X design across the middle. And that is because it's partly because it will be seen from the back and I wanted it to look sharp. And it's also because it'll give a little bit of strength because it is pretty thin steel. Like I said, I think it's 20 gauge. It might be 22 gauge, but it's nothing huge. Now this is an Eastwood bead roller. I love this thing. I ended up getting the motorized attachment for it because it's just me. And I cannot do the handle with one hand and then manipulate the steel with the other. It's practically impossible. So that motorized unit makes quick work of it. Now I'm just doing an X here. It's a good design. It'll make it look pretty sharp, and it'll add a little bit of strength. So here's the bender that I've been using for the last few years. It does an okay job. You need to have at least 3 inches to get that clamp down on it to do the bend. And it can only do up to about 20 gauge steel. But other than that, it's all right. So here's my pneumatic hole punch. It's awesome for putting in the perfect size holes for you to then do spot welds on it. So this is a real simple design, just 1/2 inch square tubing with a steel box around it. And I'm welding everything except for the top. The top will be removable. That way you can slide the fuel tank in and out. That fuel tank actually fit pretty good in this thing. And then I throw in the other piece of steel that I've got here, and then I just kind of line it up, mark it where I want it, cut that off, and then I'm going to use some 1/2 inch square tubing again, and I'll put it right on that line, and then that way when I use the angle grinder, I can get the cut as clean as possible. And it does grind up the 1/2 inch square piece just a little bit, but in this case it doesn't matter because I'm just going to weld to it anyways. So when I was watching this footage initially, that was what finally made me look at how much time I was wasting making all these cuts with the grinder when I could have just used a bigger shear for it. And that was where I finally broke down and bought that Bailey. Boy, I sure love this pneumatic hole punch. It sure beats having to get the drill every time you need to do spot welds. So here's more of that scrap steel. So I just mark it up and take it back to the shear. This is where I was really getting frustrated with this stupid thing. Trying to cut a longer piece with a 12-inch shear. All right, finally I've got some help here. So my son was operating the foot pedal for the motor because I was doing a large piece here. And I did a design that I think looks pretty good. I had to curve it around where the fuel tank slides in, and that's because the fuel outlet, it's obviously it sticks out of the tank, and so I needed to create a groove in it, and I wanted to reinforce the area around that groove so that it doesn't get too flexy. Little man here looks like a OSHA inspector. Don't worry, he's wearing safety glasses. So you can see how that groove is now cut out so that once I put the fuel pump back into the tank, it'll slide in and out of this thing easy. All right, guys, that's it for episode 4. Thanks for watching. Just to give you an idea of what to expect next, episode 5, the plan is to finish everything except for the paint and then final assembly. And then episode 6 will be painting it and then putting everything together. And then after the 6 episodes are completed, I'm going to take it out in the desert and see what breaks. So that should be pretty fun. That'll be a standalone episode, and it'll be kind of a recap for people who haven't been watching all of these. So that'll probably be in 3 weeks. I have some other projects, unfortunately, that I have to cut in the middle of this, so it's going to be pushed back a little bit farther, but I will keep you in the loop on that for sure. Thanks for watching.